everyone, I'm Daniela, and today we're making my sister-in-law Alyssa's Nonna Angela's Italian ricotta cheesecake. The ricotta cheese makes it really light and delicious, and unlike other cheesecakes, it's completely covered in pastry. I'm gonna show you how to make it.
Let's make our pastry. You'll need 3 cups, 360 grams of flour. Add in 115 grams, half a cup of cold cubed butter. I'm using salted butter, but if you're using unsalted butter, add in a pinch of salt. Start working the flour and butter together. I find my hands the best tool for the job, but you could also do this with a pastry cutter or 2 knives. Once your butter has started to break down into smaller pieces, add in 1/3 a cup, 66 grams of sugar, and a half a teaspoon, 2 grams of baking powder. Continue working the mixture together until it resembles a wet sand. So if you squeeze it in your hands, it will hold together and then quickly break apart with a gentle touch. To a separate bowl, add 2 eggs and whisk well. Add the eggs into the center of your flour mixture. Then start to bring it together with a fork. It should still be pretty crumbly at this stage. To bring the dough together, you're going to want to add some cold water. How much you add will depend on the consistency of your dough. I like to start with 1 tablespoon, 15 milliliters of ice cold water and continue to add 1 tablespoon at a time until it's the right consistency. You'll know it's ready when the dough stops crumbling apart. I like to turn the dough out onto the work surface and just give it a few turns. If your dough feels a little bit sticky to work with, you can add in a light dusting of flour, but not too much. Slice the dough into 2 pieces, one slightly larger than the other, then form into discs and wrap and put in the refrigerator for at least 1 hour or overnight.
Let's make our filling.
Add 3 tubs, 750 grams or 26 ounces of ricotta cheese to a bowl.
I'm using wet ricotta cheese, but if you're using dry ricotta for this, add in 2/3 a cup, about 160 milliliters of whole milk to the filling. This will ensure your filling is super smooth and creamy.
We're going to be adding 4 eggs to our ricotta cheese, but I like to whisk in between adding each egg to make sure they're well incorporated. Then add in 2 teaspoons, 8 grams of vanilla extract, and half a cup, 100 grams of granulated sugar. Give that a whisk until completely combined and then add in the zest of a lemon. One more quick stir and we'll set that aside while we roll out our pastry. I'm using a 9-inch, 22 centimeter springform pan.
Preheat your oven to 175 degrees Celsius or 350 degrees Fahrenheit.
Dust your work surface and pastry with some flour. Roll the pastry wide enough so that it covers the bottom and the sides of our 9-inch springform pan. I like to place my pan on top of the pastry. It gives a good indication if the pastry is rolled out thin enough. I find the easiest way to lift the pastry is to roll it back over my rolling pin. Then I move the pan in place and unroll the pastry into it. Gently tuck the pastry into the pan, pressing it to the side so that it sticks really well. And if you have any gaps, you can always fill them in with any excess pastry hanging over the edge. Let's roll out the top piece of our pastry.
You can just roll out a full piece of pastry and make a cross in the top, but I'm going to show you how to do the more traditional lattice.
When making a lattice crust, I prefer to keep the pastry as square as possible. It helps to make sure you can evenly cut your strips. Once your pastry is rolled out to about 3 millimeters thick, you can start to cut your strips. For me, the easiest way to make a lattice on top of a pie is to create it on a piece of parchment and then slide it on top of the pie. I've traced the pan on a piece of parchment and flipped the piece over so that no ink transfers to the dough. Start by forming a cross with your pastry on top of your parchment. Then add a piece to the right side of your initial piece of pastry. Do the same to the left of your first piece of pastry. And then with the horizontal strip of pastry, fold it back onto itself and place another vertical piece of pastry. Continue placing your pastry strips, folding each piece over and back to create that lattice pattern. Once all of your vertical strips are laid, you can do the same thing with your horizontal strips. You can leave gaps in your lattice if you wish. I like to keep them quite close together so that no bits of the filling rise up through the lattice. And once it's all put together, I like to give it a gentle press down onto the paper with some lightly floured hands. This helps all the pieces of pastry stick together. Pour all of that silky filling into the pastry. And then with the help of a cutting board or a baking sheet, I like to lift the lattice up and transfer it on top of the filling. This can be a little bit tricky, so make sure to take your time. Press the lattice into the sides of the bottom piece of your pastry. Then leaving about 1 inch of dough, with a sharp knife, remove the excess dough on the top. With the remaining inch of dough around the top of your pan, fold it over onto itself, encasing the lattice into the bottom piece of pastry, and into the oven.
This needs to bake for about 55 minutes to 1 hour. You'll want to check to make sure that the inside isn't wobbly. You'll notice your cheesecake may have puffed up in the oven, but don't worry, it will settle back down again as it chills. Let this cool to room temperature and then pop it in the fridge for at least 1 hour or overnight to get the perfect texture. You can store this cheesecake in the fridge and eat it within 3 days. If you've got some leftover ricotta cheese lying around, why not try my velvety? And if you found this video helpful, please hit the like button, and while you're there, make sure to subscribe because I come out with a new video every week. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.